I want to talk about kind of my career and some of your careers. And first thing I want to say is, why did we all come to Harvey Mudd? And I think we'd all say we enjoyed technology. What's the wrong one? We enjoyed technology, we thought technology was great, and we all wanted to study it. So we did that. We all made it through Mudd, maybe even further college after that. But what are we going to do with it? We need to take that technology that we've learned all about, and we need to make something useful out of it. Hopefully it'll get us a little bit of money. I went and got a degree in physics, and because I really enjoyed figuring out how things worked. But long about junior year, I kind of said, what am I going to do with a bachelor's of physics degree? I didn't really want to go to grad school right away, and so I wanted to get a job. Well, what can you do? What kind of job can you get with a bachelor's of physics degree? So I called myself an engineer, and I took engineering classes for junior and senior year, and I called myself an engineer. And when I decided to go look for a job, I remember Ted Gibson was in the room across the hall, and so we had sort of a contest. We had a contest to see who could get the most rejection letters from employers. And we both did very well at this task. But eventually, and then we took the rejection letters and started pasting them on the walls outside our rooms. As a matter of fact, we even had so many that we went over the roof above us. So our room was all plastered with these letters. But eventually, we both got jobs as engineers. And I got a job as an electronics engineer. And my job was designing electronic instrumentation, digital voltmeters. So I got a job at Dana Laboratories, and this is one of the instruments that I worked on. It was a 5.5-digit digital voltmeter called Dana 5900. And in that time, I also worked on a 6.5-digit digital voltmeter, which had a resolution of 1 part in a million. So that's about as technical as I'm going to get here today. And I worked at Dana for about 3 years, and I kind of found that I really wasn't made to be in a lab all day. I kind of found it a little bit restricting. So, as a design engineer, you're basically in a lab, working at your desk. You don't get to see many people. In the wintertime, you go into work before the sun comes up and get out after the sun goes down, so you never see the sun. And I decided that really wasn't what I wanted. So I went and talked to some friends, and they suggested becoming a field application engineer. Still sort of technical, and I could talk to engineers and be out in the sun somewhere. So I went and got a job with National Semiconductor as a not a design engineer, but as a field application engineer. And so here I was no longer a design engineer, and now was an application engineer talking to design engineers. Well, I did that for a while, and then they promoted me to the corporate FAE manager. So now I was managing application engineers who talked to design engineers, getting farther and farther away. I enjoyed that job, but after I was there for 11 years, and I finally decided I was not really enjoying working in a big company anymore. And you could work your real hard all day long, and at the end of the day, you said, did anybody notice? Did anybody care? Did it make any difference? And you really couldn't answer any of those questions. So I decided I wanted to get into a smaller company. So I found another semiconductor company. So I found another company called US2, which was also in the semiconductor industry. And the business model for this was that it was a company that was using an E-beam direct write-on wafer technology because mask costs for custom circuits was very expensive. This way, we felt we could build custom circuits for lower volume applications. Good idea, didn't work. So it crashed in about 18 months. The good thing is they had developed a good CAD group, which they sold to Cadence. Not supposed to be there. Cadence decided to buy this group, and so I spent some time getting the CAD group integrated into Cadence. So, came back again. Interesting side event note was that in both National and in Cadence, I worked with a fellow 74 graduate, Joe Costello. So he was in both those companies at the same time I was. So, but the good news, coming out of US2, I did meet the vice president of Europe of US2, and I read in the newspaper that he was made the CEO of a new startup company called ARM. So I called him up and I said, hey, when you need somebody in the US, I'd be happy to work for you. A couple months later, he said, yep, that's right. Come on board. So I did, and ARM was a startup, started up in 1990. The first location for ARM was in Cambridge, England, in an old refurbished barn. So you've heard of startups starting in garages. We started in a barn. It turns out I was the 18th employee of ARM, and I was the first employee outside of England. Matter of fact, the first office for the US was in the downstairs bedroom of my house, so that was the first office. ARM was set up to be was a joint venture between Apple Computer and Acorn Computers. And so we were set to develop technology for both companies. Now, I don't know if you remember, but in the early 90s, Apple introduced a product which they called the Newton, which was promoted by the CEO at that point, John Sculley, said it was a personal digital assistant. It was not very well received. As a matter of fact, there were many cartoons written about how bad it was. But Acorn, you have one? You still use it? Acorn was a computer manufacturer, and they had a great success in the UK marketplace. And they had enough engineers that thought they were such hot stuff that they decided to design their own computer chip. And it was a RISC chip using RISC technology. And, but that was very expensive for Acorn to do. So when Apple approached them saying, hey, let's spin out that group into a separate company, they said, that's a good idea. So they took 12 engineers from Acorn, Apple threw in some money, and formed the company. Shortly after the Newton was introduced, John Sculley left Apple and Steve Jobs came in. The first thing he did was cancel the Newton project. Shortly thereafter, Acorn went out of business. So here we were, a company which had no reason for being. That was our technology. We were developing technology for these people. Fortunately, however, Nokia was introducing digital cell phone. And they had the same technical requirements that the Newton had, in that they wanted to be low power, battery operated. So they chose to use the ARM processor, and then every other handset manufacturer chose to use the ARM processor. So our business took off. Why was it such a great solution for these problems? Well, here's a little acrylic thing that was set up by what was called the Microprocessor Forum in 1992. And they got chips from all of the manufacturers. And you can see the different sizes of all these things. Well, the ARM processor is the one way at the top, which is about a quarter the size of all the other ones. So it's much smaller, which means it's much lower cost, and also has fewer transistors, so it's much lower power. So that was our real claim to fame. So as you know, the mobile market has just took off tremendously with large volume, so we were able to go public in 1998. So we had, it was a little strange in that this was kind of the start of the dot-com boom, and there were many companies that were going public with a dot-com in their name. They had no product, They had no revenue, they had no profit, and they were getting tremendous high valuations. Well, we kind of suffered a little bit by that because we had a product, we had revenue, and we were profitable. Well, as you know, the financial community has a great measure for valuing a company. It's called the P/E ratio. Well, these companies that had no revenue or no earnings, they couldn't use that, and they got these tremendous valuations. We had earnings, so we got a lower valuation than them. Of course, they've all gone out of business, and ARM is still in existence. So where did we go from there? Well, the ARM was very successful in the mobile marketplace. I would guess that probably every one of you has a phone or a smartphone or something like that on your possession today. But the ARM has now gone into many, many different applications. iPhones, the Droid phones, tablets, smart watches, smart TVs, automobiles, but basically anything that's battery powered or has internet connection is using an ARM. So just looking at this group, I'll bet you there's a lot of those ARM processors in this room right now. Well, how did ARMs go? In 2017, there were 21.3 billion ARM-based chips shipped, with a cumulative of over 138 billion. If you take that number and you realize how many people are in the world, that's more than 15 ARM processors for every man, woman, and child in the world. In this room right here, there are probably more than 2,000 in your possessions. So it's become very, very widely used. Pardon? And you know, I would love to say that we were smarter than everybody and that we were, you know, well advanced, and we started out with, you know, 12 engineers out of a company, and we didn't even have any sales department when they started. So the reality is, timing is everything. We just happened to be the right product at the right time when the mobile market took off. And in that acrylic block I showed you, all of those people were, all the other manufacturers were focusing their development on either desktop computers or workstation computers, and they were very, very focused on creating very high computing performance devices, whereas we were looking at good performance but very low battery power. So because the mobile market took off, we were very successful. And I mentioned a little bit about the dot-com boom. As you can see, here is the dot-com boom. I mean, it was incredible the amount of value that went into the ARM stock during that time. And then, of course, this down here is the bust. Again, remember I was saying timing is everything? See that little green arrow up there? That's when I sold my stock. Huh? We had a P/E ratio of 1,000. I didn't think it was going to go much higher than that. So I've been retired since then. I've been on the board of directors of Catholic Charities, the board of directors of Charities Housing, and we've been doing a lot of traveling, including a trip to Antarctica with the Harvey Alumni Association with our fellow classmates Martin and Charisse and Rick Levin and his sons. And it was a great trip. It turns out for Marie and I, it was our 7th continent, so we've been to all 7 continents. So life is good. That's another trip to the Galapagos. So thank you very much.